It started with little things. A delay in his replies. A sudden rush out the door claiming team dinners that didn't include photos or stories, just vague smiles and a phone that never left his hand. We worked in the same building, just on different floors. But somehow, we felt worlds apart. His phone was always face down now, locked tighter than a vault. And that warmth in his eyes when he looked at me? It was dimming. I wasn't sure what had changed, but something had. Then came the whispers. Not from him, of course, but from the office. Overheard elevator chatter, a slip of a name. Ashley. Young. New. Too close. People said they were always laughing a little too much in meetings, lingering a little too long near the elevators. I'd hear her name like an echo in passing conversations. But I kept my expression calm, like none of it reached me. Internally, though, I was listening to every word, every shift in energy. I didn't accuse, I didn't cry, I didn't even ask. If something was happening between them, I knew the truth would show itself, eventually. I've never believed in screaming matches or tears at desks. I believed in observation, patience, strategy. If he's hiding something, I told myself, I'll find out the right way. And deep down, I already knew. I just needed the pieces to fall into place. The distance grew heavier with each passing week. He started staying late more often, casually blaming it on a new project or team deadlines, but his stories didn't hold up under light. He never mentioned names, no details, just broad strokes of corporate excuses. And when I asked if he wanted me to drop by for lunch, he always had a reason to say no. The excuses were polished, too polished, like someone rehearsing a script they no longer believed in. I noticed how careful he became with his phone, how he'd tilt the screen away, silence it mid-message, even take it to the shower. The same man who once left his inbox wide open on our couch now guarded every notification like it held state secrets. There was a tension in his shoulders he tried to hide, a flicker in his eyes when my questions got too close. He wasn't just lying. He was unraveling, and trying desperately to look composed while doing it. I started paying closer attention, not out of desperation, but clarity. I watched patterns, noted the nights he stayed late that aligned too perfectly with her floor's events. The small talk from coworkers turned into silent glances. The office had its own way of speaking, through rumors, timing, and energy shifts. I didn't confront him. I didn't need to. I could feel it in my gut, in the silence that used to be filled with love. Something was already broken. One afternoon, I caught a glimpse of them in the lobby. Too close to just be colleagues, too familiar in the way they smiled at each other. He didn't see me, but I saw enough. She laughed at something he said, touching his arm like it was natural, like she'd done it before. That laugh. It wasn't the kind you hear in meetings. It was the kind people save for after hours. And right then, I realized I wasn't imagining anything. I was witnessing it. But I didn't flinch. I kept walking, heels steady, heart hammering. Rage wasn't useful yet. I needed clarity, not chaos. I went back to my desk, answered emails, scheduled meetings, and replayed the image in my mind like a film I needed to study frame by frame. I didn't want a confrontation. I wanted understanding. I wanted the full picture, clear, undeniable. So I started watching everything from the top floor, where emotions don't cloud judgment. Because here's the thing. Betrayal is loud, even when no one says a word. And once you learn how to listen, really listen, the truth comes faster than you think. I didn't go looking for proof right away, but when the gut feeling stops being a whisper and starts screaming in your ear, you learn to trust it. I began small, just monitoring calendars, comparing schedules. That's when I noticed a pattern. Same conference room, same time, different meeting titles. Ryan and Ashley always seemed to coincidentally need the same space. Not once, not twice. enough to feel deliberate. It was almost insulting how sloppy they were. I checked our internal message system, saw innocuous exchanges with suspicious timestamps. And then came the Instagram stories, Ashley's little breadcrumbs, blurry wine glasses, dim lighting, a hotel bar I recognized from a company retreat. She never tagged anyone, but the clues were all there. One night, she posted a quick shot of a city view. That same evening, Ryan texted he was stuck in traffic. The skyline matched. I didn't even have to zoom in to know he was lying. But the confirmation came quietly, wrapped in something so ordinary it felt surreal. Netflix. We still shared an account. At 9:47 p.m., a device pinged from a hotel across town. Some romantic comedy autoplaying. I wasn't the one watching. That's when the ache hit hard, not just the betrayal, but the insult of it. He was comfortable enough to use our shared logins in a hotel with someone else. And that, somehow, was what made it real. No more doubts, just clarity. I didn't cry. Not that night. I sat in bed with my laptop on my knees, staring at the continue watching row like it had betrayed me too. I felt hollow, like the breath had been knocked out of me but my body hadn't caught up yet. There's a strange calm that comes with certainty. It's not peace, but it's close. And in that stillness, I decided I wouldn't fall apart. Not for him, not for this. I wouldn't let his choices define the end of my story. That next morning, I walked into the office like nothing had changed. I wore the lipstick he once said made me look too confident. Good, let him feel it. I said good morning to people I barely spoke to, smiled more than usual, and from my floor, I watched them. Not obsessively, strategically. If I was going to act, it had to be with precision. No accusations, just quiet collection. Let him think I was naive. Let her think she'd won. But here's the truth, no one tells you. When a woman is silent, she's already building something. A boundary, a plan, a reckoning. And I was building mine slowly, methodically. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted control. If I was going to leave, it wouldn't be with shattered dignity or unanswered questions. I'd walk out when I was ready, on my terms, and with the kind of exit no one could ignore. I started saving things, screenshots, calendar overlaps, the way their lunch breaks started syncing up like clockwork. I even made notes, timestamps, subtle behaviors, missed calls that lined up with Ashley's stories going live. It felt like watching a performance from behind the curtain, where all the illusion fell away and the truth stood naked. I wasn't hurt anymore. I was sharpened, focused. Something inside me had shifted, and there was no going back. At work, I kept my tone light, my posture easy. I laughed in meetings. I hit every deadline. But inside, I was stitching together a narrative they didn't know I was writing. Every digital trail, every lie he told with a casual shrug, every moment he underestimated me, I gathered them like threads. I wasn't just his girlfriend. I was his colleague. And he had forgotten that part. That mistake would cost him. I didn't want to make a scene. I wanted to leave a mark. The kind that doesn't erupt, it echoes. I wasn't going to scream in his face or beg for answers. No, I'd wait. I'd let it unfold naturally, under fluorescent lights and formal emails. Because if I had to endure this betrayal, I'd at least make sure I walked away with more than just closure. I'd walk away holding the pen. Most people at work didn't know my title carried weight. I wasn't flashy. I didn't flaunt connections. But I'd spent years climbing, one smart move at a time. And while Ryan was busy chasing flirtations on conference calls, I'd been building something real. What he didn't realize was that I wasn't just another employee. I was 2 doors away from the VP of HR, someone who'd seen my work, trusted my instincts, and who didn't take policy violations lightly. So I began my case. Quietly. Thoroughly. I gathered everything. Time-stamped emails, calendar overlaps, building access logs that showed them leaving together long after hours. I even included witness statements, colleagues who'd seen the two of them grabbing drinks, ducking out of company events early, sharing private jokes in team settings. I wasn't bitter, I was deliberate. Every piece of information had to be irrefutable, professional, clean. Let the facts speak for themselves. Then I found something even bigger. Ashley was referred by Ryan. At first, it looked harmless, just a name on a referral line. But when I checked our internal policy, it was crystal clear. Romantic involvement with a referred hire without disclosure, violation, favoritism, grounds for disciplinary action. Suddenly, this wasn't just personal, it was corporate. He hadn't just broken my trust, he'd broken the rules. And that gave me leverage, the kind that couldn't be ignored. I didn't rush. Timing mattered. Emotion couldn't bleed into this. It had to look clinical by the book. I drafted the report with precision, organizing everything like a lawyer preparing for trial. I attached the emails, the access logs, screenshots of internal chats. Even the hotel Netflix login, absurd as it was, had a place in the appendix. I didn't write accusations. I wrote observations, patterns, inconsistencies. And I let the story build itself through evidence. I knew how these things worked. HR doesn't act on rumors, they act on documentation, and mine was airtight. But the beauty of it all? I never had to raise my voice, not once. While Ryan thought he was getting away with it, I was already 5 steps ahead, drafting a future where I didn't just walk away, I walked taller. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoring something he tried to take from me, my dignity. I walked into the VP's office one morning with a folder in hand and a calm smile. She greeted me like always, warm, professional. She didn't expect what I handed her. I said it simply, "I thought you should be aware of this." No drama, no trembling voice, just facts. She nodded once, opened the folder, and began to read. I didn't stay to explain. I didn't need to. I knew I'd said enough, and now it was her turn to act. That afternoon, I returned to my desk like it was any other day. I answered emails, signed off on reports, joined a video call with a client in London. But under it all, there was a pulse, a quiet satisfaction humming beneath my calm exterior. No one knew what had just been set in motion. Not Ryan, not Ashley. They were still laughing 2 floors below me, unaware that the ground was shifting under their feet. I watched the office like a strategist surveys a battlefield. HR worked quietly, always has. There'd be no public spectacle, no dramatic outbursts. Just polite calendar invites and private conference room doors closing with soft clicks. That's how it's done. And when it starts, it's fast. I knew that. I also knew I wouldn't be informed of every step, but I didn't need to be. I'd already done my part. The machinery was running now, and so I waited. Not with tension, but with certainty. This was no longer a guessing game, no more gut feelings or half-truths. This was a process, professional, precise. And soon, the consequences would catch up. Not just with Ryan, but with the version of him that thought I was too soft, too trusting, too blind to notice what was happening right under my nose. It started quietly, just like I expected. A few closed-door meetings, some nervous glances. The air in the office changed. You could feel it, even if no one said a word. HR doesn't move until they're ready, and when they do, it's swift. I saw the first signs in Ryan's posture. Shoulders stiff, jaw tight. He wasn't joking around with his team that morning. He barely looked up from his screen. Something had reached him, and it rattled him. Later that day, he was called in. The email landed like any other, but I recognized the sender. I'd sat in that same office with that same HR lead for entirely different reasons. Promotion reviews, strategy sessions. Ryan, though, walked in with the energy of a man who knew he'd been caught but was still hoping it might all blow over. I didn't watch him go. I didn't need to. But I knew the moment the interview began. Everything slowed. Then came Ashley. She looked surprised, unprepared. Security met her before she reached the HR floor. Not loud, not cruel, just firm, professional, final. She was escorted out before lunch. No announcement, just absence, a desk left in limbo, and no one dared ask why. The silence was louder than any office gossip. Ryan came out an hour later looking smaller somehow, like his suit didn't quite fit him anymore. By the time the news reached the rest of the office, it had already lost its shock. No one was surprised. That's the thing about secrets. They leak long before they're exposed. People whispered behind their coffee cups, pretending to be shocked, but I saw the knowing in their eyes. They'd noticed too. The flirtations, the late meetings, the slip-ups. No one said my name, but they all looked at me differently now, with a quiet respect. Ryan wasn't fired, not officially. But he might as well have been. His title was stripped, his projects reassigned, his calendar cleared. The access badge that once opened half the building was reprogrammed to a single wing. He no longer sat in executive briefings. No more travel. No more clients. Just spreadsheets and damage control. He kept his head down. He didn't come near me. And honestly, that silence was louder than any apology he could have offered. I walked past his desk that afternoon. He didn't look up, but I saw his screen, an empty inbox blinking, no new meetings scheduled. I smiled softly to myself, not out of cruelty, but because something had finally shifted back into balance. There's a power in knowing you didn't have to raise your voice to be heard. That sometimes consequences arrive not with fireworks, but with quiet, irreversible decisions made behind polished office doors. I returned to my desk with a fresh coffee and a calm heart. No one said a word, but I could feel their eyes. Not with pity. No, that moment had passed. What they saw now was control, composure. I answered emails, sent off a quarterly report, even laughed on a call with a longtime client. My world hadn't ended. It had recalibrated. And the best part? I hadn't stepped out of line once. I'd played by the rules. He hadn't. I passed Ashley's empty desk on my way to the break room. Her chair was still slightly pulled out, like someone had left in a rush. Her plant remained on the windowsill, wilting. It struck me as poetic in a way. Something brought in with so much energy now left behind to rot in sunlight. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. That space, like the relationship they tried to build behind my back, had already died on its own. People underestimate quiet women. They mistake our stillness for passivity, our calm for weakness. But I've learned there's strength in subtlety. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I delivered consequences in silence, wearing heels and a polite smile. And Ryan? He learned the hard way that betrayal doesn't always come with a slam of the door. Sometimes it walks right past you like you don't even exist. That night, his message came in like a final flicker from a dying match. Why would you do this? 4 words, no punctuation, no apology, just bewilderment, as if I'd blindsided him. I stared at the screen, almost amused. He still hadn't figured it out, hadn't realized this wasn't revenge. It was a response, a mirror, a consequence. I typed slowly, deliberately. I didn't cheat. I didn't lie. I just responded. And then I turned off my phone. There was a quiet relief in that moment. Something weightless. Like unclenching a fist you didn't know you'd been holding. I didn't expect closure from him. I didn't want it. The closure came from the choices I made, from the control I reclaimed, from knowing I never stooped to his level. While he unraveled, I had already moved on, in heart, in mind, in purpose. All that remained now was the next chapter, one that didn't include him. Weeks later, I accepted an offer from a competing firm. More flexibility, better pay, and most importantly, respect. The VP herself had given me the glowing referral. "They'd be lucky to have you," she said. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. Not because I needed validation, but because I'd earned it. I'd survived a betrayal, yes. But more than that, I'd proven something to myself. That I could rise, even when someone tried to pull me under. On my last day at the company, I took one final walk through the building. Not out of nostalgia, but as a quiet goodbye to the version of me who used to shrink herself. I passed familiar desks, nodded to old teammates, held the door open for someone who never learned my name. I wasn't sad. I wasn't bitter. I was ready. This place had been part of my story, but it wasn't where it ended. I was choosing what came next. As I stepped outside, the air felt different. Cleaner somehow. Lighter. I paused at the edge of the plaza, glancing back one last time. That's when I saw him. Ryan. Leaning against the wall near the loading dock, cigarette in hand. He looked tired, hollow. There was a slump to his shoulders I didn't recognize. Stress clung to him like smoke. For a second, he looked up, our eyes met. And I saw something I hadn't seen in months. Regret. I didn't stop. I didn't wave. I didn't say a word. I just gave him a polite smile, the kind you offer a stranger on a train. And then I walked on. Not because I was trying to be cruel, but because I had nothing left to say. He'd already heard everything he needed to hear the day his world began to crack from the inside. I wasn't his lesson. I was just the result of his choices catching up. As I walked away, the wind picked up, carrying the faintest trace of my perfume, the one he used to call irresistible. I wore it deliberately that day, not for him, but for me. It reminded me of who I was before all the lies. A scent tied to dinners where we used to laugh, to mornings when I still believed his promises. Funny how something so soft could carry so much strength. He inhaled, and I knew he recognized it. That was enough. I didn't need revenge. I needed release. And I had it. I had my peace, my new job, my pride intact. While he remained behind, trying to pick up the pieces of the mess he created, I was already miles ahead. Not in distance, but in growth, in freedom, in clarity. This wasn't just the end of a relationship. It was the end of who I used to be when I accepted less than I deserved. And as I disappeared into the city crowd, head high, heels clicking like punctuation marks on the pavement, I realized something. You don't always need to burn bridges. Sometimes the best response is to rebuild a new path so strong, so radiant, that they have no choice but to watch you walk it, without them.
Sacred. And for me, that place was a 2-story house at the edge of town, where the wind always smelled like blooming jasmine in the spring. My name is Nicole, and I used to think that if I was kind enough, quiet enough, helpful enough, maybe I could earn love that didn't feel like a performance. Growing up, I was the daughter who followed the rules. I did the dishes without being asked. I stayed home when my sister went out partying. I got straight A's, not because anyone demanded it, but because I thought maybe, just maybe, that would make them proud. My mom used to say, "Nicole's our sensible one." My dad would just nod. They never really saw me, but I didn't know that back then. I was too busy trying to deserve their attention. That house, our house, was where I made breakfast every Sunday, where I decorated for birthdays they sometimes forgot were mine, where I sat in the living room alone, watching family movies while they went out for quick dinners that turned into late nights with my sister and her boyfriend. But I never complained. I convinced myself that love meant patience and loyalty was louder than words. I wanted so badly to be enough for them, even if I had to earn it every single day. So when my parents casually said, "This is your home too, always," I believed them. I believed them when they handed me keys and smiled. When they needed help with bills, and I quietly offered to cover some. When they said we're family, I trusted that meant me too. But what I didn't realize then was that love without effort is a fragile thing. And the cracks had been forming for years, subtle, quiet fractures in the way my name was an afterthought, the way my space was borrowed, not truly mine. I held onto that house like it was the anchor to our bond, until one day, without warning, the warmth faded. The words they spoke next would shatter everything I thought I knew about family. And that house, it didn't feel like home anymore. It was a Tuesday afternoon, quiet, ordinary, almost forgettable. I had just come home from work, balancing groceries in one hand and my phone in the other. I walked in like I always did, like it was still my place, still my home. But the moment I stepped inside, something felt different. My mom was sitting at the kitchen counter with her arms crossed, and my dad stood behind her, unreadable. My sister was nowhere in sight. There was no small talk, no smile, just silence thick enough to suffocate. Then my mom looked up and said it, just like that. "We don't need you anymore, Nicole." I froze, unsure if I heard her right. Her voice didn't crack. It didn't hesitate. It was sharp, flat, final. I blinked. What does that mean? My dad chimed in. "We think it's best if you find your own space. Give us all a little breathing room. Don't contact us for a while." The words hit like glass to the chest, quiet but devastating. No argument, no fight, just cold dismissal. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't even crying. I just stood there, clutching a bag of apples like they were the last thing tethering me to the moment before everything broke. I wanted to ask why. I wanted to remind them of the rent I'd paid when things were tight, the dinners I made, the nights I stayed in when my sister didn't. But I didn't. Instead, I nodded. Quietly, almost too quietly. And I said, "Okay." That was it. I turned around, walked out the same door I had walked into 1,000 times before. But this time, it didn't close behind me with warmth. It shut like a final chapter. No one followed. No one called after me. They just let me go like I had never belonged there to begin with. And as I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, I didn't let the tears fall. I respected their wishes. But something inside me shifted. Something permanent. Later that evening, I checked my phone. My notifications were filled with vacation photos, my parents smiling with my sister and her boyfriend on a beach, my mom in a sun hat, my dad holding up a drink, captions like, "Family time is the best time." Not a single mention of me. And still I didn't respond. I didn't lash out. I didn't beg. I simply stared at those photos, took a deep breath, and started thinking. Not about revenge, but about reclaiming what was mine. I didn't sleep that night. It wasn't just the words, "We don't need you." It was how easily they said them. How easily they let me walk away like I was a tenant whose lease had expired, not their daughter. Not the girl who stayed home on prom night to help my mom decorate the house for guests. Not the one who drove dad to his appointments when no one else could be bothered. I lay on my tiny apartment couch, still in my jeans, phone clutched in my hand. That's when the notification came in. Mom just posted a photo. My stomach sank. I clicked it. There they were. My mother, glowing in a sun hat, drink in hand. My dad, lounging with sunglasses, grinning ear to ear. And front and center, my sister and her boyfriend, arms wrapped around each other like some perfect holiday postcard. "Family time in the Keys," the caption read. "So much love." I stared at that word, family, like I was never part of it, like I had been cropped out and replaced. The photos kept coming, beach walks, dinner toasts, boat rides. Every picture a reminder that I was no longer in the frame, that I was replaceable, optional. I felt like a deleted chapter in a story I helped write. I kept scrolling, even though each image carved deeper. My sister in my mom's old shawl, the one she promised to pass down to me. Her boyfriend sitting where I used to at family brunch, cracking jokes, being called the fun one. It wasn't even that they went. It was that they celebrated without me. So publicly, so happily. No mention of where I was. No trace of grief or hesitation. Just smiles. I don't think I'd ever felt so invisible, so erased. I curled into myself on that couch. I didn't cry, not yet. I just sat there, still cold, unraveling. And for the first time, I realized that love in my family had always been conditional. Be quiet. Be useful. Be easy. And maybe you'd earn a seat at the table. But I had changed. I had respected their wish for space. And now they'd shown me what they really valued. It wasn't me. Still, even in that pain, a strange clarity began to rise. Something cold and certain. Because what they didn't know was, the locks on that house, they were still mine. I didn't scream. I didn't call or text or send angry paragraphs. Instead, I sat up on that couch, opened my laptop, and got to work. See, what my parents forgot, or maybe never bothered to remember, was that the house they kicked me out of? It wasn't really their house anymore. My name had been on the deed since 2 years ago, when I'd refinanced the place after Dad's layoff. I'd paid every mortgage bill since then. Quietly, willingly, just happy to keep us afloat. But they'd never asked for the full story. They were just happy the lights stayed on. So when they told me, "We don't need you," they didn't realize they were standing on ground I legally owned. That night, I changed the locks. Not out of revenge, out of clarity. I called a locksmith I trusted, had him come by the next morning. We installed a keypad system. I updated the codes, set up remote access. Then I walked into the garage and stared at my dad's car. That silver Camry? The one he drove every day like it was his pride? The title had my name on it. It had been gifted to me by my uncle when he passed, but Dad had needed a car and I'd handed over the keys saying, "Just until you get back on your feet." He never did. I pulled out the paperwork from my folder, took a photo of the VIN, and contacted a local dealership. By sunset, the car was appraised and sold. The funds wired into my account. Clean and quiet. No posts. No rants. Just business. Next came the bank. I had co-signed for their credit card back when my mom had back surgery and they couldn't get approved a loan. My signature had opened that door, and now I was ready to shut it. I didn't cancel it outright. That would raise flags. I froze it, just like that. Transactions? Declined. Access? Denied. It felt calm. Not vindictive. Not dramatic. It felt like I was finally stepping into the truth. For years, I had played the good daughter role, always giving, never asking. They called it love, but it was dependence in disguise. The moment I wasn't useful, I became disposable. Now, I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was just done being hurt. Done being a background character in my own story. So I stood in the hallway of that house, my house, and looked around. The quiet felt different now. Not lonely. Not sad. It felt powerful. Because the next time they came home, the locks would be new. And the rules would be mine. The front porch light clicked on as the car pulled into the driveway, or what used to be their car. Now there was just an empty space where it once stood. Nicole watched from the upstairs window, arms folded tightly across her chest, silent and composed. Laughter floated out from the driveway. Her parents were back from their week-long vacation. Some kissed, relaxed, dragging matching luggage behind them, joking with each other like nothing had happened, like they hadn't told their daughter she wasn't needed, like they hadn't exiled her and replaced her with her sister and her boyfriend in one smiling Instagram post after another. Her father reached into his pocket and pulled out the house key. Click. Then again. Click. Twist. Nothing. A pause. He tried again, slower this time, jiggling the key, confusion wrinkling his brow. "Did it jam?" he muttered. Her mother stepped forward. "Try mine." The same result. Locked out. They looked at each other, puzzled. Still not worried, not yet. Not until they looked around and finally noticed. The blinds were drawn. The car was gone. The porch flower pots Nicole had planted were missing. The doormat was new. Cold realization began to seep into their sun-warmed skin. "This isn't right," her mom whispered. They knocked. First politely, then harder. "Nicole!" Her mom called through the door, voice rising, wrapping it in forced sweetness. "Honey, open up. Let's not be dramatic." No response. Her dad reached for his phone, dialed, and froze mid-call. Declined. He stared at the screen. Tried again. "Call failed," it read. They exchanged a look. Her mom pulled out her card from her purse and walked to the corner coffee shop. She returned less than 5 minutes later, face pale, holding the receipt with declined printed in bold. "Panic now." I don't understand, she stammered. I do, her dad said, low and angry. She's punishing us. Nicole opened the upstairs window, just an inch. I'm not punishing anyone, she said, her voice calm, almost too calm. Just respecting the boundary you set. Her mom looked up, shocked. We said we didn't need you in that moment, her dad snapped. And I listened, Nicole said, eyes steady. Now, please respect my wishes. He banged the door. This is our house. Nicole tilted her head, slightly. Check the deed. He faltered. She didn't slam the window. She closed it quietly. The porch light clicked off. They stood there in the dark, vacation smiles long gone, replaced by something they hadn't felt in years. Powerlessness. Nicole didn't feel joy. This wasn't revenge. It was a line in the sand. They crossed it first. She just decided not to pretend anymore. The silence in the house grew louder as Nicole leaned back against the window, watching her parents struggle at the door. She felt the weight of their absence, not just from the house, but from her life. Their presence had always been a looming shadow, casting doubt on her self-worth, making her question if she was ever enough. But tonight, the weight was different. This time, it wasn't just about her. It was about them, their choices, their blind spots, their relentless favoritism. She closed her eyes, the memories flooding back like a tidal wave. Growing up, it was always clear that her sister, Emma, was the golden child, the firstborn, the one who could do no wrong. Their house had always felt like Emma's stage, and Nicole was merely a shadow in the wings. Every parent-teacher conference, every family gathering, it was Emma who got the praise. Emma's grades were perfect. Emma's personality was magnetic. Emma was always fun, always outgoing, always the center of attention. And Nicole? She was the quiet one, the boring one, the overthinker. Whenever Nicole did something right, there was always an unspoken, but, "You could be more like Emma, you know," her dad would say after she aced a test, his voice laced with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Or her mom, after a family dinner, would casually mention how much easier Emma was to deal with, how much more charming she was. The moments had been so small, barely noticeable at first, but they accumulated. They became the background noise of Nicole's life. Overlooked, underappreciated, always compared to someone who felt like the perfect version of what her parents wanted. And then came the vacations, Emma's perfect boyfriends, Emma's flawless trips, Emma's sparkling life. Nicole was just the observer, the one who tagged along as the afterthought. Every picture posted on social media, every family moment, seemed to have Emma as the star, with Nicole lingering somewhere on the edge. This latest betrayal wasn't something new. It was just louder. It had cut deeper, because this time it wasn't just about being second best in her parents' eyes. It was about being invisible. It was about being replaced. I wasn't enough, she whispered to herself. She had tried so hard to earn their approval, to fit into the mold they had set. But in the end, it wasn't enough. And now, as she stood on the other side of the door, locked out of their world, she realized something. She wasn't just second best. She was done trying to fit their expectations. Nicole stared at the door, her hand resting on the new lock she had installed earlier. It wasn't petty what she was doing. It wasn't some act of revenge to make her parents suffer. It was a way to finally, after years of trying to be the good daughter, take back the power they had stripped from her. She wasn't asking for their love anymore. She was honoring herself. Her fingers brushed over the car keys she had sold a few days ago, feeling the cold metal, like a symbol of everything she'd given up for their approval. Her car, her name, her worth. She had let them dictate her entire life up to this point. No more. The first thing she did after they kicked her out? She contacted the landlord, making sure the house was legally transferred to her name. It wasn't just the locks she changed. She had carefully, strategically taken back what was always hers. The house was in her name now, her parents none the wiser. As for the car, she'd sold it quietly, moving the money into her own account. They didn't deserve it. She didn't need the financial burden or the memories tied to it anymore. She didn't just want to protect herself from them. She wanted to be independent, truly independent for the first time in her life. But more than that, she wanted to make sure they understood one thing. She wasn't a backup. She wasn't a placeholder. She wasn't someone to be discarded when they felt like it. So, When they left for their vacation, basking in their joy, thinking everything was fine, Nicole took control. She made those legal calls, filed the paperwork, and had every detail squared away, quietly and efficiently. It felt strange, the way it seemed so simple after years of being emotionally bogged down by them, as if taking action was the only thing that had ever truly made sense. There was no fight, no yelling, no begging them to see her as more than a second option. Instead, she had built something for herself, and that felt powerful. She didn't need them to validate her decisions. She didn't need to argue or prove her worth anymore. That was the moment everything changed, the moment she realized she didn't just survive them. She could outlive them. She could thrive without them. No more pretending. No more begging for crumbs of affection. No more sacrificing her happiness for their approval. She wasn't a child who needed permission. She wasn't the outcast or the invisible daughter anymore. She was free. Standing there in her house, Nicole felt something she hadn't in years. Peace. Real peace. The kind you can only get when you stop looking over your shoulder for approval and start living your life on your terms. When her parents came back, they'd be met with a harsh reality, not just a locked door, not just a list of legal documents, but a daughter who had finally said enough. It wasn't about getting back at them. It was about finally living life without constantly measuring her worth against their expectations. For once, she wasn't chasing after love that was given conditionally. She was giving herself what they couldn't. The calls started coming in the moment they realized what was happening. It was a flurry of missed calls, frantic text messages, and voicemail after voicemail. At first, Nicole didn't even bother to check them. She knew what they'd say. She already knew what they would feel. Her phone buzzed again. A message from her mother. Where are you? What have you done? We're stuck outside. We need your help. But Nicole didn't rush to respond. She didn't feel the urgency they had. She didn't feel the obligation to soothe their panic. Instead, she sat back on the couch, her hands resting in her lap, calm and composed. A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. She hadn't felt this much control in years. They never thought this day would come, did they? The daughter they dismissed, the one they casually kicked to the curb, the one they replaced so easily, she was the one who held the keys now. The phone buzzed again, this time with a text from her father. We need to talk. You can't just do this to your family. We need a resolution. She could hear the tone in his message, the frustration, the pleading. The man who had told her she was worthless all those years ago, the one who had barely glanced at her when she needed him, was now begging. Begging for the very thing they had denied her for so long, attention, respect, a place at the table. She read the message, feeling a tightness in her chest, but it wasn't anger that filled her. It wasn't the rage she had anticipated feeling. Instead, there was only quiet satisfaction, a sense of peace, because for once, she wasn't the one chasing their love. She decided to call back. When her mother picked up, her voice was frantic, panic-lacing every word. Nicole, why are you doing this? Please just let us in. We don't know what happened. We don't know where our things are. You need to fix this. Nicole let the silence sit for a moment, listening to the words, feeling the weight of the desperation in her mother's voice. She hadn't heard that tone in so long, not since she was a little girl, asking for validation, begging for attention. But now, she wasn't the one begging anymore. Got it, she said, her voice steady and unhurried. No anger, no bitterness, just calm finality. Her mother's voice trembled. What do you mean, got it? We need to fix this. We need you to fix this. I've already fixed everything, Nicole replied, her tone soft but firm. I've given myself what I deserve. And now it's time you did the same. She hung up before they could respond, her heart strangely light. She wasn't angry anymore. She was done. They had made their choices, and now she had made hers. Later, the phone kept ringing, but Nicole didn't pick up. She didn't need to listen to their excuses anymore. Their panic was their problem, not hers. As the days passed, they tried reaching out, calling her every name in the book, blaming her for ruining the family. But none of it mattered. They had kicked her out, treated her like an afterthought. But now, the girl they thought they could discard became the one thing they never saw coming. Their source of control, their source of comfort, the one they never thought would stand up for herself, had finally become the one who held all the power. And in that power, she found freedom. Laughter and clinking glasses echoed through the lavish ballroom. It was her brother's wedding, a day filled with celebration, joy, and family coming together. Emily stood near the back, away from the dance floor, watching her mother float around the room like royalty and her sister flashing her usual perfect smile. Everything looked perfect. No one could have guessed what was already unraveling beneath the surface. Emily had arrived early that morning with a carefully sealed envelope tucked in her purse. Inside was a cashier's check for $50,000, a wedding gift she had quietly arranged weeks before. It was never meant for public applause. No spotlight, just love. She had always been that kind of daughter, steady, dependable, invisible in her sacrifices. When others gave wrapped boxes or heartfelt speeches, Emily gave without a word. She remembered the conversation with her mother just a few nights earlier. "You don't have to go big," her mom had said, brushing Emily's concern off with a casual laugh. "You've done enough, honey." But something in her tone, that practiced indifference, had left a familiar sting. Emily smiled anyway and promised herself this would be her final big gesture, something meaningful to mark a new chapter. Her relationship with her mother had always been tangled. Love mixed with silent expectations. With her sister, it was worse. Kayla had always been the golden girl, fun, loud, charming. Emily, in comparison, was the backup plan, the responsible one who picked up the pieces and paid the bills no one talked about. But today wasn't about comparison. It was about love. So she slipped the envelope to her brother quietly, pulled him into a quick hug and said, "Don't tell anyone. Just use it for something that matters." He looked stunned. She saw tears in his eyes. That moment, so real, so pure, was why she did it. Not for recognition, for family. And for a few hours, Emily allowed herself to feel good. She smiled. She danced. She believed this time, maybe, things would be different. But betrayal has a way of hiding in plain sight, and hers was already waiting in the shadows. It started with a routine check. Just days before the wedding, Emily sat at her small kitchen table with her laptop open, sipping coffee, going through her banking app like she always did on Sunday mornings. She had always been meticulous about her finances, budgeting, tracking, organizing. So when she saw the numbers didn't add up, her stomach sank. $19,000. Gone. At first, she thought it was a glitch. She refreshed, logged out, logged back in. Nothing changed. The transaction history showed multiple strange withdrawals, all timed closely together over the span of 2 days. Her hands froze over the keyboard. She didn't want to panic, not yet, but a slow, creeping unease wrapped around her like a cold fog. She called the bank. The representative confirmed the transfers were authenticated using her linked email, the one only she and her mother had access to for emergencies. A security measure they'd set up years ago, back when Emily had helped her mom through a financial crisis. Just in case, her mom had said then. We're family. Now, that trust felt like a weapon turned against her. Emily didn't tell anyone. Not right away. She needed to think, needed to be sure. But the signs started appearing fast and loud. Her sister, Kayla, strolled into the rehearsal dinner wearing a designer bag Emily recognized from a catalog she could never justify splurging on. Then came the new gold bracelet, the suspiciously upgraded phone, the casual mention of spa treatments in passing conversation. Emily's heart twisted. Could it be coincidence? Was she being paranoid? But then Kayla let it slip, a careless joke made while toasting cocktails with her cousins. Let's just say I've been having a little unexpected help lately. Right, Mom? Their mother laughed. Not nervously, not apologetically, just amused. Emily sat a few feet away, quietly observing. Her smile was gone. She wasn't angry, not yet. She was calculating, replaying every time she had covered someone's bills. Every time she'd been told she was too serious, too controlling, while they lived carefree lives funded by her silence. It wasn't just about the money. It was the betrayal of it all. The audacity, the entitlement, the ease with which they took as if she didn't matter, as if her sacrifices were expected, not appreciated. She didn't explode. She didn't confront. Not yet. Because Emily had learned one thing growing up in that house. Being loud got attention, but being quiet, being patient, that's when you got power. And now, she was done being the quiet giver. She was about to become something her mother and sister never expected. The storm they thought would never come. Emily didn't plan to cause a scene. That had never been her style. But after days of watching her sister parade around like royalty and her mother treat her like a background character in her own family, the silence had started to rot inside her. She couldn't sit with it anymore. The wedding was the perfect picture of joy. White roses, twinkling lights, a string quartet humming in the background. People were laughing, clinking champagne glasses, smiling for photos. But Emily's chest felt tight as she spotted her mother and Kayla laughing near the banquet table, like nothing had happened, like they hadn't taken something from her. She walked over, slow and calm. Her voice was steady, but her heart was beating so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Can I talk to you both for a minute?" she asked, motioning toward a quieter corner near the terrace. Her mother raised an eyebrow. "Now," she said, already annoyed. Kayla gave a dramatic sigh, but followed. Once they were out of earshot, Emily didn't waste time. She held up her phone, screen lit with the bank statement. "There's money missing from my account. $19,000. Transferred using credentials tied to our shared recovery email." There was a beat of silence. A flicker of something passed across her mother's face, but it vanished so fast it could have been imagined. "What are you saying, Emily?" her mother asked, voice cold and clipped. "I'm asking if you know anything about it," Emily said, choosing her words with painful care. "Because if this is just a mistake—" "A mistake," her mother snapped. Her tone sharpened, drawing Kayla in like fuel to a fire. "Are you accusing me of stealing from you? Is that what this is?" Emily swallowed hard. "I'm not accusing anyone. I'm asking." That's when it happened. Her mother's hand came so fast, no one saw it coming. The slap cracked through the air like a whip. Emily's head snapped to the side, and her body stumbled, hitting the terrace wall with a dull thud. The music stopped. Conversations froze. Every pair of eyes turned. Emily stood there, stunned, her cheek burning, tears threatening, but not from pain. From shame, from betrayal, from the cruelty that seemed to live so comfortably in the people she once protected. "You ungrateful brat!" her mother screamed, her voice rising in hysteria. "After everything I've done for you, how dare you accuse me?" Emily looked at her, really looked, and all she saw was someone who never saw her as a daughter, just a resource. And then, through the shocked silence of the party, a new sound echoed through the room. The steady footsteps of her husband, Daniel, rushing forward, his face unreadable. He had arrived just in time, and when their eyes met, Emily's pain turned into something else entirely. A promise that this moment wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Emily stood against the terrace wall, one hand pressed to her burning cheek. Her mother's shout still echoed in her ears, but the silence around her now was deafening. The wedding party had frozen mid-celebration. Glasses halfway raised, laughter half formed, all replaced by stunned disbelief. Then came the sound that shifted the air. Footsteps. Firm. Intentional. Daniel. Her husband didn't run. He didn't shout. He didn't ask questions. He walked through the crowd like someone used to being watched, someone who expected rooms to fall quiet when he entered. And they did. His dark tailored suit looked sharp against the soft wedding lights, but it was his presence, calm, controlled, commanding, that made everyone take a step back. Kayla's smile cracked. Their mother's righteous fury faded into a tight-lipped scowl. Daniel stopped beside Emily and gently touched her elbow. "Are you all right?" he asked, low enough that only she could hear. Emily nodded, but the tears she had fought earlier now shimmered in her eyes. He didn't say another word. He turned, calmly facing her mother and sister. "I heard everything," he said, his voice clear but quiet. "From the driveway." Their mother's jaw tensed. "She accused me of stealing." "And you hit her," Daniel replied, nodding slowly, eyes locked onto hers. "In front of dozens of witnesses." Kayla laughed nervously. "Okay, everyone needs to calm down." Daniel raised a single finger. No, we're not going to gaslight her. Not this time. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. He held it out, and Kayla hesitated before taking it. Her face went pale the moment her eyes scanned the numbers. "What is this?" their mother demanded, reaching for it. "It's a printed transaction history," Daniel said. "The $19,000 transfer?" It was traced. The IP address, the recovery email, the linked device, all tied to your shared laptop at home. You didn't even bother using a VPN. The crowd murmured. Whispers rose like smoke. "You had no right," their mother snapped, trembling now, "to snoop through." "It was my wife's account," Daniel cut in sharply. "We're legally married. Her assets are protected under joint marital law. I have full rights to investigate suspicious activity. And I did." Kayla tried to speak, but no words came out. Their mother looked around for support, for sympathy, but the wedding guests weren't making eye contact anymore. No one was coming to her defense. Daniel turned to Emily again. "Do you want to press charges?" Emily looked at her mother. At Kayla. Their fear was louder than their words now. But she didn't answer yet. I just wanted to be part of this family," she whispered. "And you broke that." She took Daniel's hand. Then, for the first time that night, Emily stood tall, not as the daughter, not as the scapegoat, but as someone who finally held power. They had shamed her in public, and now the truth was out just as loudly. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He reached into his jacket again and pulled out a tablet. With a few taps, the screen lit up, and what he showed wasn't just a single bank transfer. It was a curated timeline of betrayal. "Let's begin," he said calmly, plugging the device into the venue's projector. The screen flickered behind the wedding arch. Guests turned, curious, then confused, then stunned. First, a screenshot of the bank transfer. $19,000, gone in one transaction. The timestamp matched exactly the afternoon Emily had been out finalizing wedding plans with the caterer. It had been timed for when she wouldn't notice. Next came the recovery email used to confirm the bank security check, a throwaway account tied to Kayla's old username. Then came chat logs. Daniel had retrieved archived messages from a forgotten family iPad. In them, Kayla messaged their mother. "She'll never notice. She's too busy playing wedding planner. We deserve something too." Gasps erupted in the room. One elderly aunt covered her mouth. A cousin shook her head. Friends began whispering. Their mother stood frozen, her lips pressed tight. Kayla turned ghost white. Then Daniel pulled up the location history from the same night, showing the device used to access Emily's account was logged into from their mother's house. The date? 2 days before the wedding. The same night they had all gathered for dinner and toasted family forever. "I didn't think you'd go this far," Emily whispered, looking at them both. Her voice was barely audible, but in the stunned silence, every word landed like a weight. Kayla tried to interject, but Daniel simply raised his hand again. "We're not done." He tapped the screen one final time, showing a message their mother had sent, one Emily had never seen. "Emily thinks she's better than us just because she married rich. Let's remind her she's still one of us and that we made her." Silence. Dead silence. That's when the shift happened. The polite smiles from guests twisted into frowns. A few people backed away from Kayla. Someone turned off the music altogether. The celebratory air had thickened into something sour and cold. "You could have asked me," Emily said softly. "I would have given it to you. But you stole and lied, and then tried to make me feel crazy for noticing." Their mother finally spoke, her voice shaking. "You brought this humiliation on yourself." "No," Daniel said. "You did that when you hit your daughter in front of 100 people, when you called her a liar, when you stole her money and expected her to stay quiet. This wasn't vengeance. This was truth aired publicly, not with screaming, but with evidence, with undeniable facts. The kind of truth that doesn't need to shout because it already echoes louder than any lie." And for once, Emily didn't feel crazy. She felt free. Emily stood quietly near the floral arch, her fingers unconsciously brushing the outline of the red mark, still tingling on her cheek. But the real pain wasn't from the slap. It was from everything it represented. The memories hit her all at once, like a dam cracking wide open. She'd always been the dependable one, the one who understood when they didn't have enough, the daughter who loaned her first college paycheck to help cover Kayla's prom dress, the one who worked double shifts in college, not because she was asked to, but because she had been raised to feel it was her role. Her parents didn't say thank you back then. They said things like, "You're so good with money," or, Kayla really needed that. And she believed them. She wore that invisible badge of provider like it was something to be proud of. She thought giving made her worthy. That if she kept helping, kept saying yes, they'd eventually see her, not just as a wallet, but as a daughter. But the pattern never stopped. After she landed her first real job, it was her who paid for their overdue rent. When Kayla wanted to start a small business, Emily funded the inventory and watched as the whole thing fell apart with zero accountability. She even paid off her father's car loan when he hinted he might lose it. Never once was it presented as optional, always as expectation, wrapped in guilt. If she ever hesitated, her mother's disappointed sighs or Kayla's passive-aggressive silence would do the trick. And yet, the love remained one-sided. The moment she started setting boundaries, like not paying for Kayla's third vacation in a year, she became selfish. Now, looking back, she didn't feel anger. Not anymore. She felt clarity. They hadn't just stolen $19,000. They had stolen years, her sense of security, her ability to say no without shame, her rightful place in the family as someone loved, not used. The truth was, Emily had never really been the daughter. She had been the bank. And now the bank was closed. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, but her hands were steady. She looked around at the guests in the room, their shocked faces frozen in place. Some were still processing what had just been revealed. Others were too uncomfortable to look her in the eye. The weight of the moment hung in the air like thick smoke. Her mother's face was pale, her eyes wide with disbelief and shame. Kayla, once so confident, now stood in the background, looking smaller than Emily had ever seen her. They both had expected her to crumble, to beg for answers, to fall into the chaos they had created. But Emily wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. She straightened her back, glanced at her husband, his jaw clenched, eyes seething but calm. He had stayed quiet through the revelation, letting the evidence speak for itself. Emily could see his fury underneath, but he didn't need to say another word. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice even. "I'm sure you all have your own opinions now. I trust you'll make the right choices moving forward." The silence in the room was deafening as she walked across the room to grab her purse from the table. Her fingers didn't shake, but the cold rush of finality washed over her. This wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming her dignity, her worth, her life. Turning to her mother, who had not moved, Emily took a step closer. "I'm done funding my own disrespect," she said, her voice unwavering. The words hung in the air like a final blow. They were the words her mother had never expected her to speak. They were the words that, in that moment, shifted everything. She didn't wait for her mother to respond. She didn't need to. Her husband stood up beside her, his presence a silent but powerful declaration of their unity. He gave Emily a nod, and without another glance, they walked toward the door. But before she stepped out, Emily stopped for a moment at the threshold. She turned to face her family one last time, her emotions a quiet storm within her. "You don't get to decide who I am anymore," she said, her voice steady but heavy. "And you won't get another chance to steal from me." With those words, she stepped out of the house that had once been her home, her mother's house, the place where she had been raised to believe that giving and giving was the price of love. The moment she crossed that threshold, everything changed. No more guilt, no more excuses, no more being the family's ATM. Her husband followed her out, closing the door behind them, and for the first time in years, Emily felt a weight lift off her chest. The world outside felt different, bigger, freer. As they walked toward the car, Emily knew that this was just the beginning. They had severed ties, legally, financially, emotionally, and there would be no going back. A year had passed since the wedding, a year full of change, growth, and a newfound peace that Emily hadn't thought possible. It was as if everything that had once weighed her down had been lifted, piece by piece, leaving only space for the life she had always wanted. The business she'd started after cutting ties with her family had flourished beyond her expectations. Her professional life was thriving, and she was finally able to build something on her own terms. No more family demands, no more guilt trips. Emily had created a space where she was the priority, where her value wasn't tied to her ability to give. Her husband, always her rock, had been there every step of the way, and together they had built a future they both could be proud of. There was even more joy on the horizon. Emily's pregnancy was something she cherished deeply, a symbol of the family she had always wanted, a family built on love, respect, and mutual care. It was a life she could never have imagined when she was still caught in the web of her mother's manipulation. Meanwhile, her mother and sister had fallen into a steady spiral. The business they had relied on to sustain themselves had crumbled. The lavish lifestyle they had enjoyed, built on Emily's hard-earned money, had evaporated. Her mother, once a figure of authority and control, was now struggling to make ends meet. Her sister, too, found herself in a financial mess, with no safety net to fall back on. Emily's absence had left a void, but it wasn't the void they had expected. One afternoon, as Emily sat in her sunlit office, she noticed her phone buzzing with a number she hadn't seen in months. It was her mother. Her fingers hovered over the screen. The familiar pang of anger didn't come, though. There was no rush of emotion, no desire to pick up and lash out. Instead, there was just a quiet, calm sense of finality. She let it ring out. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed again, a message. "Emily, I've made a mistake. We need your help. Please, I don't know what to do. Please, just help us." Emily read the message, but the words didn't sting. She didn't feel an urge to call back, to fix things, to rescue them from the mess they had created. She had spent too long being the one who was asked to help, the one expected to bail them out, to be the constant savior. But that wasn't her anymore. She put the phone down gently and walked over to the window, staring out at the life she had built. It wasn't just the business or the baby on the way, it was the peace. It was the clarity that came with knowing her worth, her boundaries, and the fact that they were untouchable now. The next morning, Emily replied, "I'm sorry, but I can't help you. You made your choices, and I've made mine. I wish you well." The phone call that had once filled her with dread now left her calm. It wasn't about revenge or anger. It was about boundaries. Healthy ones. Ones that protected her from the emotional turmoil her family had once dragged her into. She knew her limits now, and she wouldn't apologize for them. As the weeks went by, her mother and sister never reached out again. But it didn't matter. Emily was finally free. It wasn't the end they had hoped for, but it was the end Emily needed.